The United States has announced $800 million in new aid for Ukraine. As the war enters its fourth week, America is providing everything from long-range missile defense systems to Switchblade armed drones, enabling Kiev's forces to defend against Russian aircraft and armor. But there is a big question mark on the actual delivery of these weapons to Ukraine and the risks involved. Russia has already made it clear that any delivery of foreign weapons to Ukraine would be legitimate targets. On Sunday, we saw how quickly the conflict could escalate as Russian missiles hit a large Ukrainian base near the border with NATO member Poland. 35 people died, over 130 were injured. Russia's defense ministry said it targeted a large number of weapons supplied by foreign countries that were being stored at the training facility. Let's now break down for you. The US is sending these arms to Ukraine's military. The first is S-300 long-range missile defense systems. Ukraine has had the ability to shoot down Russian aircraft from close distance. But with this, it can now strike attacking aircraft from further away. Sources suggest that the systems are Soviet-made S-300, which means that the Ukrainians already know how to operate the S-300. They are similar to the US-made Patriot system, a fully automated ground-based radar and missile launcher unit. It can detect, track and fire at multiple incoming aerial threats at long distances. The second is US-made Switchblade drones. They are dubbed as the kamikaze drones. They are camera-equipped, remote-controlled flying bombs. They can be directed by an operator to find and plunge onto a target, exploding on contact. Switchblades can extend the range of attack on the Russian vehicles. That gives them an advantage over the guided heat-seeking missiles that Ukraine is using. With the West unwilling to provide its fighter jets, these drones are cost-effective and crucial. The third, anti-aircraft Stingers. Stingers are shoulder-mounted infrared anti-aircraft missiles. The US provided these to Afghan fighters in the 1990s. This helped them shoot down Russian helicopters. Ukrainians have already been using them effectively against Russian helicopters. The fourth on the list, US-made Javelin. It has become the weapon of choice in Ukraine. Dubbed Saint Javelin, it is prized by the military for its technical characteristics. It is equipped with 2 explosive charges, can pierce the most sophisticated tanks in the world. The first charge explodes on contact with the tank, and it then releases a second, more powerful charge which pierces the armor. Along with these, the new arms provision also including 7,000 other anti-armor weapons, 1,000 machine guns and rifles and grenade launchers, 20 million rounds of small arms ammunition, and 25,000 sets of body armor and helmets. For more on these developments, Sarang Shidore, the Director of Studies at the Quincy Institute, is joining us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for being here. Help us understand how significant is the supply of these arms to Ukraine and to what extent they will actually bolster the Ukrainian defense.
It's a significant development and a part of a pattern in which the United States and its partners are aiding a country that's been invaded by an external power and is exercising its right to self-defense. These armed drones will raise Ukrainian capabilities by a few notches higher. They are able to take down positions on the ground that can also minimize collateral damage in the process. So this latest aid package, including the armed drones, is a part of this continuing stepping up of support for Ukraine as it continues, as the war continues in the region.
Right. Russia had warned that Western arms supplies in Ukraine could be targeted. To what extent should the US be concerned about this warning?
Yes, I think this warning by Russia is about any supply lines that come from NATO countries to support the Ukrainian military. And Russia has signaled that this would be a hostile act and this would be a cause for targeting. Now, we saw that attack by Russia on a base in Western Ukraine. Now, that base was within the territory of Ukraine. The concern here is that if Russia sees a supply line or a delivery that is right on the border of Ukraine and its NATO neighbors, or indeed within NATO territory, and takes action, then this escalates the entire conflict well beyond Ukrainian borders, because NATO, of course, is a military alliance with a mutual assistance clause, Article 5, and it would be normally seen as an attack on a NATO member and would require a response. So the escalation potential in this war is extremely worrying. And that's why I think it's really important that these arms transfers, while they are in aid of a country that's been attacked, also need to be kept in the context of this war not continuing for a long period of time and opening up the sorts of escalation potential that can lead us to a much wider configuration with impacts on U.S. national security, first and foremost, but also for the region and the world.
Right, that's exactly the escalation potential that the West has been trying to avoid and trying to contain the conflict. Biden had earlier said that their direct involvement through a no-fly zone would trigger a third world war. What message is Russia trying to send out with this warning to the West, calling the arms supplies to Ukraine a dangerous move? Is it preparing for an escalation?
Well, Russia, I think, is trying to draw some red lines. How firm they are remains to be seen. But I think certainly Russia is having trouble executing its plan, it appears, from all that we know on the ground. And this time that has been gained by the Ukrainians is also time that enhanced deliveries of weapons and so forth can happen. Now, in that process, this sets up a potentially very dangerous spiral, because as the Ukrainian military justifiably fights the Russian invasion, but if there is no corresponding diplomatic effort to bring this war to an end and achieve a sort of at least a ceasefire on some reasonable terms, and then hopefully a settlement, these sorts of warnings and counter warnings can translate into actual actions on the ground, which reduce the space for statesmen and stateswomen in terms of responses, because there are treaties, there are commitments, there is credibility and so on in question. So there certainly is a risk that every week the war continues, the risk of escalation creeps up higher.
Sarang Shidore, appreciate very much for joining us on the broadcast. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.